All right, I call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Correctly.
Here.
Washington.
Here.
Percola. Weiss.
Here.
Middleton.
Here.
Babke.
Here.
Westerhoff.
Here. All right, please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're recording.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda?
No.
Hearing none. All right. AFT report.
Pulling it up. One step ahead of me here. Okay, I know Kyle's on here.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, and there's Kyle. Hi, Kyle.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Let me adjust my volume. Okay.
That work?
Okay. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Try saying something again.
Hello, good evening.
Oh, I have them on my computer.
My computer. Oh, wait. Hold on, Kyle. That's that speaker thing. Do I want micro mic?
No.
Speaker.
Speakers.
Okay. Sorry about that, Kyle.
That's all right. Does that work?
That's perfect. It was on my end.
No problem. Good evening, everybody. Just to let everybody know that we're still working on finalizing the next contract. Everything's going according to plan. Just some wording for review, but other than that, I think by the August school board meeting, we should have it ready for the school board. So that's all I have tonight, unless you guys have any questions for us.
Nope.
Nope.
Thanks for a great year. Well, an interesting year, and everything that you and your team across the board has done to make this year successful.
Well, thank you. I know it was a team effort all the way around, so couldn't have done it all by ourselves.
Great. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great summer.
Kyle.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Okay.
All right. We have no public comments tonight.
Mhm.
So we're right on to administrative reports.
Okay, and all of my information is in the memo. I do want to focus time, and I'd be happy to answer questions about any of the items. I do want to focus time on our report for the 2021 board priority strategies. So I'll pull this up and I'll share my screen. And what I do, I could take a fair amount of time with this, but I won't. What I'll do is I'll clip through and hit the highlights and ask any board members who have questions. I'd be happy to stop and go in depth about any of these topics. Let's share that. Is that easy to see?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's pretty good.
Okay. So just a reminder that normally we would set these priority strategies in August and September and work on them throughout the year. This year, they were established by the board in December because of COVID. So we had a half year to work on those. They were modified accordingly. Blue, there's two ways to look at these different strategies. If it's a results goal, then we use blue to indicate that we exceeded the target or we hit the target at 100%. If it's an implementation of a strategy, then we look for at least 80% implementation, then you're blue. So it really depends on if it's a results driven goal or an implementation goal, which I know is a little confusing, but blue is the highest. Green is meet or exceed, depending on if it's a results or if it's an implementation goal, we're more than 50% or more implemented, and then yellow and red below that. Orange, we don't have orange this time of year, but we always start with orange because that means there's no data collected. So the first report next year will probably be November. And in November, you'll see more orange on these indicators because some of these data points we wouldn't have collected at that point that early in the year. And I like the one-page overview. So if anyone wonders what did we work on throughout the year, you notice that October and December were grayed out. Normally those would be data points, but starting in February, you can see the progress for each goal. So this is your highest level. There are comments there with a little bit more detail, but where we're going farther down, we'll give more detail. And this is pretty good. This is what we want to see. I'll explain why the achievement area is green in the next slide here. So for student growth and achievement, we had two different strategies. One, we were happy with our progress, but it was to really hit identify priority standards, and we made the goal for all subject areas. What we ended up hitting were all the state tested subject areas, but we still didn't get to 100%, obviously. So at grades 6 through 8, you will see more subjects. They do have ELA, math, science, and social studies covered. In K-5, we only have ELA and math, and that's typical. And that's something that Mrs. McCluskey will be working with teachers on over the next couple of years. But we're where we should be right now, but it's green, it's not blue, because it's not fully implemented, but it's more than 50%. For the second one, our goal was to get one document that collects all of our assessment practices, whether that's a state standardized test, as well as our common assessments. That's going to be our focus going forward in the next 2 to 3 years, the common assessments. So you have 2 links, and this is heavy in hyperlinks. So in the evidence of implementation, there's always going to be, or almost always going to be, a link for more detail if any board members have questions. But we hit our target or fully implemented priority strategy 2. These all build on each other for next year. Learning culture, this was our SEL target this year. We've previously reported at DLT where we were with the CASEL implementation rubric. Each school set their targets. The district's target was the cumulative result. And because of the school's work, we exceeded that target. So it's blue. And if you'd like more information, there are hyperlinks there with more detail. The professional culture priority strategy was focused on PLCs. And thanks to the good work we've done with the union, we do have that dedicated time in place. The only thing that's different is that K-5 does have that dedicated 60 minutes starting next year. That's the early release. It's a 40-minute early release plus 20 minutes from the morning time. We've just shifted that. The junior high, because of their structure of their day, really has 2 40-minute periods. They don't have the same 20-minute planning time, prep time before the day that K-5 does. But we did hit that target with all grade levels. We were excited about that. And we've completed our training for the PLC leadership team. Partnerships, this was really focused on getting a baseline for some communication feedback from parents. We use the 5 essentials. And if you click on that hyperlink, it gives you the initial information. And we do have a nice baseline that includes the 2019, 2020, and now 2021 results from parents, and it's all linked in there. We will give a more in-depth report on the whole 5 essentials in the fall. Resources, big part of what we're going to talk about tonight is the facilities plan. And so we set a target to complete that. We did that. And to begin talking about a long-term technology plan. All we wanted to do was to begin the development of it. And we have made the initial decision before we switched directors to look at the Future Ready Schools framework. I have a link to their website in there, but we want to kind of put a pin in that and not land on it yet until we get Mr. Witkowski on board, and we'll revisit that next year. That's as fast as I can give an overview, but be happy to have discussion or answer any questions.
Is there anything the board should be thinking about or preparing for as we set these goals for August and September? Is there anything you want us to do to be prepared to provide feedback and planning for that?
So there shouldn't be any big changes. What I've reported to the board previously as far as the strategies that we're going to continue, all build on what we've already done this year. So that's good. It won't be like we're throwing any new things. It'll feel like we had a year one and now we're going to year two of all of these pieces. The big change that you're going to see from me in August is instead of setting multiple priority strategies, we're going to make it cleaner and have one ELA goal for the district that'll be multi-year, one math goal for the district that'll be multi-year. And then I will show you in August how our strategies, PLCs and SEL, our assessment work will all feed that. So the goal, if you go to the first one under academic achievement, you see that the SMART results goal for math and ELA say insert in the fall of 2021. When we receive our results back from the IAR, that's going to be our new baseline. We don't want to use FastBridge for that one, but we'll give a demonstration on a SMART goal tree where the schools, individual schools will set targets. So the biggest takeaway I would have is it's as simple as this. The district will say, we want to improve math scores this much over the next 3 years. It'll be a robust long-term goal on the IAR because that's the state test. This individual schools won't use the IAR as their measurement. Every grade level will look at their GAN, their greatest area of need, decide what that is to move the needle on math, and then they will decide their own measurements. It might be a common assessment at that grade level that they want to set a year-long target for. They might use FastBridge for another year. It just kind of depends. So we can use multiple measures in math, for example. And this is where it'll be very clear in August, where we keep saying our teachers are experts. They know what we need to be working on. This is the first time that you're really going to see that in action. And the teachers have not quite experienced this yet. But it's as simple as the district saying, we're going to improve math scores. Teachers at first grade, tell us what needs to be done in 1 year. What's the, again, a greatest area of need for you? And what they pick one strategy, they work on it, and they create a hypothesis. If we do this, we're going to get a better result in math at first grade. It could be different, or it could be the same at second grade and third grade, et cetera. The theory behind that is the culmination of those moves the needle for the whole district. And so that's the piece that I'm probably most excited about, that we're going to shift away from all these implementation things we've had from the strategic plan. They're not going away, but we're going to get back to where we always wanted to be. Give us a math target, give us a reading target, and then all the initiatives we have will show, SEL is harder to show a direct link, but we do believe that the work we do with SEL impacts the student achievement part. PLCs, we're confident, has an impact on student achievement. So those things will be true strategies to meet an academic outcome. That's the biggest change I'd have you guys thinking about. But other than that, you can.
So
go ahead.
Just trying to think through this, how this kind of plays out logically, right? So in the fall, we'll understand where we were, so then we can figure out where we want to be.
The new baseline.
The new
yes.
baseline, right? Mm-hmm. So then the teachers at the grade levels and at the working with their administrators to figure out what they need to get there, right? So we can put a goal out there, and that's great, but they might need, the teachers might need more training, they might need more tooling, whatever it is that they need to get that done. So
right.
How do we as a board help those teachers, help those teachers and those administrators get there?
So they need to tell us what they, so, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. And I wouldn't expect that out of the chutes. I think as teams of teachers get more refined on what they want to do, you will get more into that. We need specific professional development on this. You could see a grade level if you had an ELA target, you could see a grade level at second or third grade. If we weren't already using the daily 5, they might say, you know what, we've done our homework and we believe that if we implement the daily 5 consistently across all of our classes, that will make a significant, that is the greatest area of need. That is a GAN for us. And they'll have their own measurements that they design off of that. That's something that they could come back and say, we need PD on the daily 5. I don't anticipate that happening in year 1, but that's the system that we're trying to build, which is truly driven on teachers knowing their students' needs and then what needs to happen. What supports do you need as an educator to get there?
So year 1 goals might be a little bit more narrow just because they've got to ramp up in terms of what they need to.
I think year 1 goal is going to be more narrow because it's brand new to everyone. And so our principals, in working with them, we want to make sure that we hit a SMART goal is the A is attainable. We don't want too ambitious of goals out of the chute. We want everybody to be successful. We're really practicing the process next year. So next year is just, let's figure out how to do this and what this is. We definitely have a growth mindset. If we will tell the teachers every day, and they're not going to believe it until we go through a year-long cycle. But if you set a target as a grade level and you don't hit it, as long as you learn from that and do something different and better next year, that's a success. I mean, we want to hit our targets, but that the end all be all is getting better at our craft. And so then as we improve, we'll try different things and the improvement will be built into the system. But next year is truly, I don't want to call it a practice year. We're learning how to use a brand new process. And so we have to give ourselves some grace with that process.
Yeah, I'm just trying to set my own expectations.
Yeah, lower them for the first year. Hold me accountable for walking us through a year of the process and making sure that we meet everybody's needs. It's going to be Greek to a lot of staff in September. Everyone it'll be more familiar by June. We'll be better at it after the first year. So we just have to kind of be patient with that, learning a new skill kind of thing.
And then Dr. Arnold, as far as like the teachers letting you know or letting us know what they need, how does that work? Is it build, the grade level teams?
Yes.
Okay.
So the PLC process, what we're not going to have the teachers do in September right away is start having these conversations. The first thing they're going to do in PLCs is start learning to be a team, setting their norms, establishing their routines, being very comfortable, being more comfortable with what do we do during this time? So we need to give them professional development on that first. But it's one of those things, learning by doing. So we're going to say, set a SMART goal. Here's how you set a SMART goal. Well, what kind of SMART goal do you want to set for your team on math and on ELA? What measurements do you want to use? That's where I'm going to bring you guys a visual of a SMART goal tree that will show we may use IAR at the board level, but I would argue teachers don't need to worry about IAR. They have more sensitive instruments, assessment tools, common assessments, things that are at the classroom level that give them better data day to day or week to week than the IAR. The IAR is a summative, end of the year, annual, external accountability measurement. That's not what we need to have the teachers focused on. They need to focus on what's going on in their classroom that day, that week. So it's going to be clunky at first. We won't do everything correctly because no one does when you're learning a new skill, but we'll get better at it as we go through, and they'll be able to tell us what they need through that PLC process. Because remember, the PLCs are really grade level teams, and they talk to the school level teams, school leadership teams, SLTs, who then communicate at the DLT level. So the board would want to pay attention next year to the district leadership team reports. That's where the conversation is going to happen about what do we need. And it could be school-based, it could be district-wide. It just kind of depends on what they tell us they need.
But I think it's important that the board recognizes that the PLC process is a long-term process. There's 4 essential questions that come to the PLC process. And that first question is, what do we want our kids to know? So just identifying that through our teaching teams is going to be a lengthy process, because we're really drilling down to identifying things that haven't been identified for our teachers in the past, and we're letting our teachers do that. It's really exciting work. So we just want to make sure that they're not overwhelmed with trying to answer all 4 questions in the first year. We know that this process is going to take a little bit of time, and I think if the teachers can understand that, we went through it at the high school, and it's been a lengthy process to just get that first question and maybe dabble into that second. So.
And that's to Grant's point. If you look still in the student growth and achievement, that's exactly why we had priority strategy 1 this year. If you read that, that is PLC question number 1. What do we want students to know and be able to do? Those are your priority standards. That's why we worked hard this year to identify priority standards in ELA and math for all grade levels. The junior high also has science and social studies. And we do have some other departments, PE, we have some others. The second question is, how do you know they know it? And that's the assessment question, the PLC process. Well, if you look at priority strategy 2 that we just finished working on this year, it's to get all of our assessments in one spot. So we know, it's important to know we don't assess just for assessment sake. What's the purpose of the assessment? And if we aren't using the data or the results, then we shouldn't be giving the assessment. We should throw that out the window if we're not using it. Or if it's valuable, we need to learn and make it a priority to use. So we've started to lay some foundation for PLC questions 1 and 2. But to Grant's point, my experience, by year 3, we might start feeling like this is a comfortable process. Year 1 is just going to be a learning year. Year 2, oh yeah, we've done this before. But this is really the foundational piece of this is trust. And trusting your colleagues at your same grade level. We have through SEL started to work on a safe data culture. That's a big part of it. When you're sharing assessment data with your team, if we were all a first grade team, I have to be comfortable sharing my students' results and not having teachers judge me. But what the mindset we want to have is we don't judge teachers. We believe we have excellent teachers. If they're not getting the results they want to get, they set out to get, we judge the strategies, not the teachers. So if I didn't get the result I wanted, what strategy did I use? If I implemented the strategy with fidelity, if I did a really good job and it still didn't hit the target, stop doing it. Let's find a new strategy. Okay, that's the learning process. And that's where that takes trust, and that takes time to build with your team, with your principal, with the district. And so that's something we will be sure to pay a lot of attention to. And we started to lay some groundwork for that this year. Great questions. This is exciting. I mean, this could be a full meeting in itself. We could, so there's a potential, when we get the DLT going next year, it's been going this year, but after that first one, we may want to have a special part of a meeting just to kind of continue to walk through the process, really to help the board understand everything that we're doing. We'll all learn together as we're going through it. Good questions. Anything else? Isn't it nice to talk about this kind of stuff and not a pandemic? I mean, this is where our heads should be as a board. So it's very exciting.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions about anything in my written report? There, it's mostly updates. Okay.
Okay. Assistant Superintendent for Business Services.
All right, thank you. My report is in the board packet. Don't really want to spend much time on that. I have not heard anything from TRS regarding the supplemental retirement savings plan. So there's really no other updates other than what was provided. However, recently off the press, the Senate, the Illinois Senate did pass legislation to approve unemployment compensation for this summer for non-instructional personnel. It hasn't gone through the House yet, so I haven't sent anything out to employees because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. The vote in the Senate was, I think, 59-0, so it has definitely legs. The good news from a financial standpoint is there's a trust fund that will pay for about 50% of it. The state is going to be applying for grants. So we're not on the hook for any financial obligations with that compared to the way it was last summer. So Once I hear more information, obviously from the House vote, I will pass that on to our employees. But just for everyone's benefit, it's up to the employees to file if they're a non-instructional personnel. The district has no say, no responsibility in that. I will just be communicating that. That's it for my report. Happy to answer any questions.
And that's the issue that they sprung on us at the last minute last summer unexpectedly. It sunsetted in January.
Is January 1st. This one would sunset September 4. And that one of my thoughts was just because of COVID's where we're at in the whole COVID progression and people getting back to work, perhaps. I didn't really know if it was going to pass or not. So we've had several employees asking, what's the status of this for this summer?
Right.
And so we just found out.
Yeah, until recently it's gone.
It's gone,
And
yeah.
now it's back. So
Yep.
stay tuned.
All right. All right. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make it.
Second.
All right. Any questions or anything anybody wants removed and voted on separately? All right. Roll call, please.
Middleton,
Yes.
Gurecki,
Yes.
Kowski,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Slice,
Yes.
Kirkla,
Yes.
Tester.
Yes. Motion carries. I need a motion for the Cisco settlement. But we're not,
You need a motion to table it because I
Oh.
still don't. Oh, I left it on the agenda just in
I know.
case, but it's still not. We don't have it.
so we should just table it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Again.
All right, this one I know is real. I need a motion. I need a motion to approve the Director of Technology contract.
I'll make it.
I'll second.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to, we'd like to welcome Bill Witkowski. We're excited to have Bill. He was in Berwyn for 10 years as Director of Technology in that position. So we are getting someone, we really look to transition this position into something with a little bit more of an education classroom focus. We are looking as a whole department on areas to improve. They have been understaffed since the summer of 2019, and we have a job posting. So we're looking to get Bill on board and then put that whole team back together the way it was prior to the summer of 2019. And we're excited about that. Bill has experience, not only extensive experience in a K-5 district or K-8 district, but also with ISB. So it's really nice to have someone who knows the ins and outs of that organization too. So we're really excited to welcome on board. Went through a lengthy process. We are happy with the applicant pool. I wasn't sure what we would get at that time of year. And I think we got a good one here. So we're excited to welcome Bill on board.
All right. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Washington,
Yes.
Gurecki,
Yes.
Slice,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Kowski,
Yes.
Kirkla,
Yes.
Tester.
Yes. Motion carries.
All
Welcome
right.
aboard.
Welcome, Bill.
July 1.
He was actually able, ISB has several different processes. June 28th, we got him a few days early. Believe me, we wanted him as soon as he could start. So he was awesome to work with and flexible on June 28th.
All right, very good.
Every day counts.
All right, I need a motion to approve the pandemic protocol memorandum of understanding for 21-22.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I am sorry for the mouthful that's called. It used to be the return to school, but we're already in school, so I had to find a different name, and that's what it is. It is redlined in your board book, so you can see the changes that were made. It's just nice that it's so much shorter. We're waiting on pins and needles to see what they do about masks for vaccinated adults. We are also waiting, probably even more, to find out what happens with vaccinations for students. Right now, it goes down to 12-year-olds. Every indication is that it's going to be opened up to 5-year-olds, 5 to 12-year-olds, probably in July. We don't know. So the timing of that and can they get both shots prior to the start of school, the thing I would continue to remind everyone is when you're fully vaccinated in schools, you don't have to worry about the quarantine issue. So if you're a close contact and you've been vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. You do still have to quarantine if you have symptoms, but that's pretty rare. And so we're waiting for more ISB guidance to come out. I've been waiting since June 11th when we went to phase 5, and we don't have it yet. But we worked with the union, and thank you to the union for being so flexible. They asked good questions, and I think we have a good plan to start the year, but we all hope that it has to be changed again in August because we get better guidance from ISB by then. So that's it.
Okay. Questions?
Cafeterias are probably the biggest thing we're waiting to see if we can open that up a little bit more. We're proud of everybody pulling together, and eating in classrooms had to happen in certain schools because of the lack of space. I know my team would like to not, I would like to not do classroom supervision every single day for lunches, but we're going to do what we need to do until we don't. So fingers crossed.
Eating is still 6 feet. We're hoping to get down to 3, or?
Yeah, that would make a big difference. And I think that's all going to hinge on the vaccinations.
Okay.
So like I said, that's a big part of the summer, and see what happens.
Okay.
Probably in July.
Roll call, please.
Percola,
Yes.
Swets,
Yes.
Batke,
Yes.
Gurecki,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Chesterton.
Yes, motion carries. We need a motion to approve the hourly wage increases as presented.
I can make it.
I'll second.
Dave, did you?
All right, so there's a memo in the board packet, just to provide a little bit of history and context to why I'm coming forward. At this point, we are looking at another minimum wage increase, as you can see on that schedule for January 1. So my goal was to get ahead of the process, use the budget timeframe to bring forward a recommendation for the minimum wage increase that's hitting in January, which is not an opportune time for us in schools. So I'm tying it back to the budget cycle. As you can see, we are looking at minimum wage increases up through 2025. Our environment is similar to other employers. It's difficult to fill our positions. We have turnover at various positions. We need to be competitive because all of our other school districts and other organizations are doing the same thing. So part of the reason why I approached this this way was to avoid that pay compression that I talked to the board about several times. But this whole work group really has helped facilitate not only my understanding of what was important to them, but truly where we wanted to be as an employer. So there are 2 recommendations in that memo. One is for a 4-tiered pay structure for this year only, as a way of compensating those who have lengthier tenure with us, to make sure that we don't have new hires coming in too closely to where we have senior level people. And then also that $1 an hour increase to deal with that minimum wage increase. So we're dealing with the minimum wage increase really in twofold. It's an approach that I think moving forward, I will be, as you can see in the memo, coming forward again next year with another recommendation, really kind of following that minimum wage hourly increase over the next 4 years. And I will say that the committee that worked with me on this was instrumental. I owe a great deal of admiration to them because their recommendation was that 4-tier. So that came directly from our staff. It was a great point, and I was happy to bring that into the plan.
And so these are all non-bargaining. This is a non-bargaining group, right, that we included in these conversations to.
Correct. This is all of our educational support personnel. So everybody from paraprofessionals to custodians to, all those positions. Yes.
Excellent.
Yep.
Good work.
You guys only had 1 meeting, didn't you?
Yeah, it was just one.
Really, I'm teasing, but I mean, how many meetings did you have approximately?
Probably lost count, but we were up into a dozen.
Yeah.
All told.
A lot of work is what I'm trying to say.
As well as, we did pull comps from other districts. It was very important As a previous board member would have quizzed me probably tonight, we did make sure that we were being competitive and comparing ourselves to other school districts. That's a big component of this. And so we did go out, and I had members of this committee go out and pull data from other school districts. So they were pulling their weight, and it was a team effort.
For this, it's not only school districts, right? We're competitive with for this personnel, right? This is private industry that we're competitive with.
Absolutely.
Or we need to be competitive.
When Amazon is out there, just picking on Amazon, offering a signing bonus, it gets really difficult to compete with that.
Thanks, Dave.
Roll call, please.
Stuckey,
Here, oh, yes. Sorry.
Wesker,
Yes, yes.
Gurecki,
Yes.
Middleton.
Yes.
Pergola,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Chester.
Yes, motion carries. All right. Board discussion items, district committees, and what our involvement will be in any or some of the committees.
Yeah, this is just a chance to kind of go through and let the board have some open conversation. Obviously, if there are two is the sweet spot for these because that keeps it a regular meeting. 3 or more is an open meeting. It has to be posted and all that. And we can certainly do that if there's ever a real desire. So I don't want to ever dissuade a board member, but 2 is that sweet spot. So as we go through, if I could just read off the different committee members, if you guys want to have discussion about any of them, it's up to you. We don't have to have 2 board members on every one. There are some that I really would encourage you to have at least 2. And the first one is district leadership team. This one meets 5 times a year approximately in the evenings. Anybody?
I would want to do that one. Yeah, I've read about it.
Anyone else?
I'm happy to stay with it.
I always feel like an auctioneer or something like that. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Paddles.
Good? Yeah.
I think if we get to 2, move along.
Okay, all right, let's keep doing that. Safe Facilities Committee does not typically meet at a time that's convenient for board members. This is one that typically meets at a convenient time for most staff. So usually this would be like a 3:30-ish type of a meeting. And so any board members who are interested in that.
Which one was this one?
Safe Facilities, we typically meet at least once, if not twice a year, but usually not more than that. Usually it's kind of a beginning of the year and an end of the year kind of committee.
I'll do that.
Oh, I was going to do that one.
You can as well.
Jim and Melissa?
Me too.
Go for it.
Choose the magic number.
I'm losing my
We can
following.
do
along.
2. All right. Policy Committee. Now, this is one that is very competitive, usually.
Been there,
Yeah.
done it.
I did it last year, and I will happily stay on that one.
Sold.
It's,
Do we have a second?
yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
I don't know that I've ever had a policy committee that had more than one
Is
board
it
member
every
on
month? Is
but-
it literally every month?
It is every month. It's usually about an hour. It's not even been an hour.
Oh,
It's
we're
very,
half hour.
yeah, half hour. It's very variable because we belong to an organization called Press. And so school policy is very, very legal. And so Press does all of the work so that we as an individual district's not trying to figure out how to best set policy. And so they give us this packet of recommendations for all of the things that either have changed from the state or new additions and all of these sorts of things. And so sometimes the packets are this thick and sometimes it's 4 or 5. Dr. Arnold does a really good job of going through it, summarizing it so that we're not digging into the weeds or getting too lost in it. So it's not as painful for me. I'm familiar with some of this stuff, but I guess we make fun of it, but it's good
Yeah.
work. I mean,
Well,
Is
so
there,
much better now.
yes.
I mean, before we'd get the packet and here's the old policy, here's the new policy, and it would be an inch thick. And unfortunately, you'd have to read the old policy and the new
Right.
policy, and it might be one sentence in a 3-page summary that changes.
Okay,
And so, yeah, now having press,
it takes it out.
it's so much, I mean, it's important to understand what the changes are and how
Right.
they impact, but a lot of times it's strictly a legal change, a date change. And some of it is just, it doesn't change at all.
Right, and it is a good way to become more and more familiar with school policy and school code. So,
What would be an example of like a school policy or school code change?
I wonder if, I don't know if we've had any since you've been on the board. It could be like sometimes, so there could be a review.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a brand new policy because of something that just became law, or it could be something that was changed or updated.
Okay, I was just asking for more so for clarity because I didn't understand what you meant. Like when you
Yeah,
said
in the
policy.
board book, like I bet
Mhm.
if you go back to March or April, one of those 2 months would have had a set in there that would have been redlined. And so we always send the first review to a first reading of the changes of the policy to the board 1 month. And then the next month, we clean up the red line version. But the red line version, to Jim's point, you can skim and quickly see what changes there were, if any.
Mhm.
If it's new, we label it new very clearly. But otherwise, every 5 years, you should review, no policy should go unreviewed for more than 5 years. So some of them are just, it's been 5 years, new
Mhm.
date, we reviewed it.
so simple,
no changes.
so I think your question, there's what, 7 or 8 sections to
8 sections.
8 sections
Mhm.
to policy, and I think section 2 is board governance.
Right,
And so
got it.
and I don't know how many policies are inside of that,
Mhm.
but policies might be how we deal with expenditures because we're unpaid, right?
Right,
But there's still sometimes expenses that the district incurs on our behalf or whatever for any number of things, conferences and those sorts of things. How that's dealt with, how it's reported is all policy. That policy is new within the last 10 years
Mhm.
or less.
Uh,
And sometimes it's updated. That's the kind of
There's
thing.
a student section. You could have
Huge
a
student
lot of updates to harassment of students
Gotcha.
and protections. And
Mhm.
Yeah,
so
transit,
when
yeah.
a new law comes into play, Title 9 was just updated. And so there were, in the past year, there were a lot of updates to policy because of that.
okay, I was more so asking because I didn't know how far that policy extended. Was it just to the board? Was it just to the school? Was it isolated to students? So when you said policy, I didn't know how broad like that term was. That's why I
Yeah,
asked.
to Matt's point, there's 8 sections
Okay.
and it covers administration, it covers educational support personnel, certified or staff, teachers, students. It's how we run the district.
Okay, I would be interested in that. That's why I was asking more questions. I just wouldn't be sure if I can make every single one because of,
Yeah, right.
you know, other obligations, but I would want to come when I could.
Yep.
Typically, as long as you're able to redline or
Mhm.
go through and make your comments or
Mhm.
questions, nor to Dr. Arnold, it's pretty straightforward. I mean,
Okay,
it's-
yeah.
I
I'll be
send it out
interested.
to the committee ahead of time
Okay,
so they
cool.
can review it prior. You wouldn't want to see it for the first time.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds good.
Facilities Committee. I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more. I don't know. I think that's the crux of the board discussion coming up in the next part. So I'd be happy to write names down, but I don't know if the board wants to look at that in a more robust way or not for the upcoming year, but that's some of the discussion we're going to have. So
I'm going to stay on.
guessing
it.
Jim, Jim
You've
is
done
a
a great
guarantee.
job.
But I would, anybody that's interested, I need a second voice. I need somebody to counter me so that I have a vision, I have thoughts and I've worked with multiple administrations on this, and I got to say that the big fallback is Gary and Jim as far as the facilities management side. They tell us what's working, what's not working. It's kind of frustrating because we've done so much to improve the district, and there are still some gaps, and need some different ideas in there too. And it's we try to meet monthly. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times it doesn't, but we do have a big crunch time for me, and Dave hears this all the time, for me, the crunch time is effectively like starting now. Because when it comes to facilities, we're working with the architects.
Right.
We need to start the discussions now so that we can be putting together documentation for the fall so that we can go out for bid in January or December if possible, so that we can secure basically get in before everybody else does. You get a lot better bids, you get a lot more selection of your contractors, and basically prepare for the 9 weeks of insanity that is the summer trying to do the work. So it's, if you've seen the changes in the buildings, that's what it is. And, you know, the vision is not this generation of students, but my vision is 5 generations down the road, will the building still be functional and upgradable? So that's my position. And again, I need some other thoughts interjected, and you know, we need to counter. We need to, you know, say, should we spend the money? Should we not? Where are those expenditures going to be best suited? So, and that's my pitch.
No, and like I said, Dave and I, what we're presenting to you in the next part of the meeting tonight is maybe a year of more board involvement, if not the whole board involvement. So like all of these committees, whether I have 1 or 2 now, if more people after the meeting want to be on any of this, email me, give me a call, and we'll make it work.
Mhm.
So
Is there a typical time this one meets, like it, because I didn't see it on here?
We've been, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We've been meeting typically early in the morning, 5 o'clock. No, I'm kidding. Like a
I was
7 or
gonna
a
say,
7:30.
Well, I have to get like the notes.
This is definitely a committee
Dave
that I
brings
think the
coffee
board,
Yes.
depending on where the
Yes.
conversation goes, the board can drive some of that,
Okay.
of how
Okay.
often, what time. And
Yeah,
things like that.
we've done it at 7 a.m. because
That's
it's
good.
the start of the workday for Gary and Jim. It's not absolutely convenient, but it's before Dave's real workday gets started
Makes
too,
sense.
so we can get things going and have discussions. And usually we have a better chance of getting, whether it's the architect or contractors, we can get them here first thing in the morning and get things rolling for the rest of the day. So, but it's totally, you know, that's negotiable.
Okay.
I've tried to work with Gary and Jim's schedules. So that's why it's been first thing in the morning.
I'm open. So if there's like flexibility and with the ins and outs, that I'm open to that as well. 7 a.m. for me, I got 4, they're getting on the bus. It is chaos. There's just no way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I won't even want to
Understood,
overcommit
yeah.
to that and be canceling everything. So, yeah,
That's,
yeah.
Push it down. And like I said, there's still room. The focus of this, I think I see could potentially be a little bit broader than it normally
Collaborative.
is in a given year, next year at least. Joint Evaluation Committee, there aren't seats for board members on that. Calendar Committee, you guys get the final say. We do still have the SEL Task Force. Did we have any board members who wanted to continue on the SEL Task Force? That is something we are looking to do at least for another year at the district level. We'll continue at the building level longer than that, but let me know. You can always, and once again, if in a month, you can let me know.
Tim, I'm happy to consult on that committee.
Okay.
I have not been able to make the meetings.
You know,
It's just been very difficult with schedule and work and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's nice having board members on the email list, so you're getting agendas and that kind of stuff. And then I always trust that people who aren't there can reach out if they have questions. So I'm totally comfortable with that. We will have an assessment task force. There aren't details on that yet. If this is something that's very interesting to you, let me know. But this is one that will probably be closer to the teacher day, meeting probably right after school. Every once in a while, we might take a day and sub people out, but it depends on the work we have ahead of us. It won't be frequent. But let me know if that's an area of interest and Certainly love that participation from a board member. Technology is another one. I know you were on that last year.
I might continue that.
Okay. Anybody else for tech? Okay.
I'll take a shot at it.
Oh, all
Okay.
right. All right. Didn't mean to sound so surprised. It was just necessary. All right. Okay. And what's the last one? Handbook, not a place for board members on that. Sorry. And that's it.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, guys.
excellent. All right, on to facilities planning.
All
Dave?
right. Dr. Arnold, can you give me
Oh,
ability
I
to
thought
share?
I did.
Sorry.
Yes.
I just need to share my screen. And this evening then, Jim, thank you for kicking us off. We've got a great start to the facilities planning discussion. This is really broken up into two components. So joining us here in the room is Bill Templin. He's a principal with DLA Architects, our firm that we use for all of our architect work. And then also joining us then remotely is Tammy Beckwith-Shalmo. She's a senior vice president, managing director with PMA. So she's gonna, her discussion is going to be on the financial side and discuss some options along those lines. Bill is here to provide context and answer questions as it relates to the 5-year plan that we just completed and I provided to the board just last month. So I'm just going to share briefly a one-pager just so that we sort of level set where we're at. Give me a moment, please. All right. So part of the purpose, obviously, for tonight is to really talk about actualizing our 5-year plan. So we were fortunate to have the direction of really dedicating this year towards working on that 5-year plan. Now the job is to figure out where do we go with that? What's going to be our implementation plan? As Jim said, there's been a ton of work that's been done in the district. The appendix to the 5-year plan talks about all of that work. However, we still have some big projects that we need to tackle. And so part of tonight then is to not obviously identify all of those projects over the next 5 years, but to work on actually looking at that 5-year plan and working on making sense of what that means. On that one pager then, I did just provide sort of a conceptual idea of how do we go about the process of starting work and getting through work. As Jim said, you know, right now is a key time for us for planning and preparing design work because it all gears up towards the bid process. And so for us, a bid process would be at least 6 months out from any kind of construction projects that are starting. So always working backwards. So with the end in mind, for us in schools, our construction time is the summer. And so we have that window of time where we can tackle the work. And so for us, getting a bid out November timeframe puts us in line at least for that summer work. So obviously then there's an awarding process. The board has to award bids. Bids obviously for our new members, we have to bid out work that's over 25,000. So most of the construction that we're talking about that's laid out in that 5-year plan is over that threshold. So we're going to be dealing with bids. We're going to be dealing with bid specs. That's where Bill Templin and DLA come into play. Then obviously we're into the implementation, the construction phase. So that's a lot of the sort of the graphical way that you sort of think about projects and why we're talking about it now. Because some might say, well, why are we worried about construction if you're talking about 2021 summer or 2022 or beyond? Well, it's because we have to start with the end in mind and work backwards. As Dr. Arnold mentioned, we do have an enrollment study that's going to be starting. And from that enrollment study, it's really going to drive a lot of the decisions that we need to make. And that is in terms of enrollment at pre-K, really all throughout the district. So a lot of our space issues will hopefully get some answers to that. But that's not going to be finalized until probably October. So for us, by meeting and starting this discussion, we can at least be thinking about what are some of what does the future hold as we're making these decisions. Then I just provided just a couple areas of focus for us. High level, this was from the 5-year plan. And if you think about how do we divide this work, how could we possibly split it up and actually dive into it? This is an effort that's been underway through the 5-year plan, but also our strategic plan that we did 2 years ago was part of this also. So we split up into remodeling and addition work, and you can see some of the efforts there. The biggest one, secure entrances. That's a huge effort that we need to undertake. But with that, though, it comes, we have to look at our office space and sort of how do we utilize our office space, any sort of realignment there. And then we have some site work. So parking lots, some of that, not very exciting stuff and not necessarily student facing, but yet still work that we have to accomplish. And then we get into O&M, operations and maintenance. And we are hitting a point with, just to throw it out, an example, Oak Prairie's roof. The lifespan is probably 25 to 28 years. Maybe we'll get a little more out of that. But that building was built in 2002. So, planning ahead is what we have to do. And so part of this discussion is identifying what are all these things that we need to look at. So I didn't start a Gantt chart yet on this, but I intend to provide an ongoing communication tool to the board from the facility committee on sort of where are we at with our big projects in a Gantt chart format so that we can at least target, okay, what's happening this year, what's happening the following year, so that everything is planned out. So that's the construction side. Obviously, this is a board discussion, so I should probably stop talking. And since we have Bill here, wanted to hear, and Jim, just thoughts about where we're at. Obviously, we've heard the presentation about the facility committee. So would like to hear from the board about the 5-year plan, where we're at with what you've seen so far.
And if I could help, some of that decision is around secured entrances.
Yes.
So the easy stuff is, do we need to replace the 1948 sewer pipe going into Ludwig? The answer is yes, before it breaks. But the more difficult conversations, and they get to money very quickly, are when we're looking at the secured entrances, the different schools have different needs. To make Oak Prairie where we need to get it, it's a few locks and you're done. I mean, the structure, the walls, the doors, the windows are all there. The other 3 schools, depending on which approach we take, which is why this is an important topic, could have other ramifications. And that's why the enrollment study is important, because we need to be looking at what is the future of Walsh as far as capacity. Right now, we had to squeeze what we could into accommodate the EC sections that you approved for next year at tonight's meeting. They're using every inch of space because of a growing need for early childhood. So as you look at, well, if we're going to build on, and you might be tempted to say we should build an office onto this building to redesign it, and 2 of the 3, if not all 3 schools of the K5 might need some office work, then you're going to want to also know what are our enrollment projections, and do we need to at the same time build a classroom onto there or not? And so we just don't want to we want to make sure that we don't spend a lot of money to build something and then realize, but now we don't have enough classroom space still. Or we have plenty of classroom space, it's not a concern. So we just want to get that good information to drive that. So I think, and then there's a lot of infrastructure pieces.
Correct.
Sewer I don't want to bring it up, but it's a lot of money, and the board needs to make a decision next year. Are we jumping into that or not, as far as sewer and water at Reed? Yeah. And so bigger decisions than tonight, but that's where we're trying to go with the conversation.
And just so we could put some numbers to this, if you look at the 5-year plan, with the contingency, we're close to $13 million if we were just to tackle everything on there. And I will say there are some things that are TBD. So that might not be a firm 13 million. If you look at our fund balance from our capital fund balance, we're looking at about a little over 5 million. So in terms of, time frame and how we can tackle things, it's just like running our budget at home. So we can't do it all at once. How are we going to do it? And what are the priorities?
When we're talking about secure entrances, what do we mean? Because when I think of Oak Prairie, I think of, okay, you go through that one door and then you can go through the second entrance into the main building, or you can go into that second entrance into the office. Are we thinking the same type of security for the other three
Yeah,
schools?
I'd add one more to that. So to us, a secured entrance is 3 buses. You have to go through 3 steps to get into where students are.
Okay,
So it's typically one to get into a building, then you're in a foyer,
vestibule.
vestibule. A second to get buzzed into the main office, but the main office is then a box essentially that you can't get out of unless
Gotcha.
you're buzzed a 3rd time to go into the school.
Okay.
So-
all right.
That's why I meant if you can picture Oak Prairie walking in, it's already there. We just need the
Right.
right kind of locking system. We're
Yeah.
done. But the other schools would need structures built.
We don't. Obviously, the
There's-
schools were all built
There's not.
before this was ever, your office was centrally located. With Walsh, we did some, during the original phase of what we call our upgrades and in the facilities, we were able to move the office to the front of the building, but it still doesn't provide a secure entrance.
No, not at all.
So our biggest thing is you look at the lay of the building and you say, okay, how can we do this effectively that we don't want to take away parking lot space, but we want to make sure that we have good ingress, egress for the students, and still have that structure. So each building, one of the curveballs, Reed, 10 years ago, there was no talk of Reed ever having a 4-lane highway in front of it. 5 years ago, it became a real problem because not only were they expanding it, but they were, the state chose to put more of that right away legitimately right in front of Reed School,
Yeah, we got 355.
as opposed to trying to get more property to the north.
Mhm.
They've elected to go close to the building. So now we're talking about having an entrance currently within 20 feet of the roadway. So it's pretty scary idea, which, as Dave would also know, and we are in well and septic.
And that's at Reed and at Ludwig?
No, just at
Reed.
just
Ludwig
at
is just the
Reed.
pipe.
And Reed simply because it is an island. And when we started this process of updating the buildings, we had hours and hours of discussions on the viability of keeping Reed open or building a new facility somewhere that we could tie into municipal water and sewer. Not because there's a problem with the septic or a well, other than the annual maintenance of it. And the fact that the septic system that was designed for Reed was designed in the early 60s. So it's not designed for the capacity and for year-round use. And what we want to do as a district is look at utilizing that facility. We have a lot of ball teams that want to play ball there year-round. The only solution is we have to bring in porta-johns because they can't use the septic field because the risk of overloading the septic system before we even get to the school year. So we've gone round and round about this, what the costs are, what's the benefit. We have to incorporate that into the decision of a secure entrance. Well, if we move the secure entrance to the back of the building, we can reroute the buses in a certain manner. Would that be viable? But if we're going to do that, and this was started in the discussion of 2019, classroom space. Going through the IASB, we went to conferences. We were looking at, well, the trend is you you design and build a school with a lot of open space, a lot of what would be alternative learning centers. You'll see a lot of schools with very large hallways that they can basically do mini outdoor classrooms. We don't have that capacity here. So the problem becomes, do you have the classroom space? And we know that it's been fixed and we either add classrooms to take on the potential for additional growth. And it's not a potential because we have the data. We've got at least 15-year trends and the student population. So we know where we need to go, but we just need to have the right plan that we feel will take us at least another 10 years down the road before we have to look at making those decisions. But sewer and water is expensive.
It is. Yes.
There's no getting around that. I mean, there's always the chance of what is termed recapture, where the district would run sewer and water to Reed School, which would eliminate all our discussions on septic and well and all of those potential headaches. But what we already know from Oak Prairie is that when Oak Prairie was constructed, they paid for a master sewer interceptor to get sewer to Oak Prairie's location. To this day, we're still, as a district, owed money by the city of Lockport for recapture. And the city doesn't owe us anything until there's growth. So until somebody ties into that line, there's no recapture for the district. So again, it's an investment, it's risk management. We've tried to do things both economically and intelligently. LED lighting. We didn't do it in Walsh because at the time it just wasn't economically feasible. By the time we got to Ludwig, LED lighting is the way to go. Simple things, things that you don't think about, but we certainly have not forgotten one of the priorities when we set these goals was secure entrances and just doing them in an efficient manner. That's gonna benefit the school for generations to come. So
the secure entrances, that's a goal in how many years? I'm just trying to make sure I have that clear, because that's the one that to me
Well,
seems like
it's a 5-year plan.
Okay.
And they've, honestly, it's just been, we all throw out the excuse of COVID, but very simply, that was, we've had 2 years of non-action because we couldn't get in the buildings. We couldn't put together a plan. We had a transition between administrations. And again, this is a decision process that is the vision of the administrators. The business manager is new to this position, so he had to understand what are our capabilities, what are our options. Those will be discussed about the financing. And, we as a board, the board turnover, everybody, this is our community, this is our buildings. So what do you want the kids to see?
okay.
What do you want that next generation of kids to come through? The biggest joke would be technology in Walsh School. And it was, this is the truth. It was designated days who could plug in their technology cart within a wing to recharge their technology. It was not, it was not any kind of directive. It was simply that the electrical system of Walsh was so limited that if 2 people plugged their carts in the same wing, the whole wing went dark. And so they had a schedule. And today we've got proper power. We've got what the teaching staff, when I first came on the board, the first question was, when are we getting air conditioning? Well, for the first time, every building, every classroom has air conditioning. Every heatilator is relatively current. In other words, in this building, the heating system that was in the classrooms was original
Mhm.
from 1950s. So you're talking 70-year-old equipment. That's all it was. Today, it can heat a room, it can cool a room. The windows are environmentally efficient as far as low E glass. Everything we could envision with the architects and the management team we had. So it's a lot of history, but basically this is just a starting point for us to basically take that next step of what I think for everybody that attended graduation, that was the first graduation that we've had on site. Granted, it was somewhat disjointed, but simply we've always stated we've never had the parking capacity. And this is a silly thing to worry about, but how much money do we invest in a parking lot? We have to think about that, because what activities could we actually then provide to the students? Part of this 5-year plan is a stage,
Mhm.
which originally was in the plans when Oak Prairie was built, but because of financing, that never took place. Well, again, we planned this out correctly. We can actually expand the arts program at Oak Prairie, be able to have programs after school, both choral, orchestral, any productions that the students and staff would be willing to put together.
We're kind of getting, there's a lot here, but I want to go back to the 5-year plan and the secure entrances. Since I've been on the board, it's something that I've felt very strongly about. We are way behind the times on secure entrances, period. The trend for secure entrances is, they've been, best practice and in place for several years, and it's been continually kicked down the road. To me, that's the priority. Our kids, their safety, getting into our buildings at every campus should be absolutely secure, and there should be enough protocol in place to make sure that every other entrance is not accessible to anybody outside. And it has been pushed down. It needs to be a priority, in my opinion. And again, I'm one voice here, but you walk into Reed School and it is not safe. There is nothing safe about it. If they get through that door, there's nothing there that will keep our kids safe. And that is incredibly important to me. So while all of the other stuff has been awesome and it's great for our kids, we are one bad event away from a whole lot of regret by not putting this into place. And that scares the daylights out of me. So
When he
agree.
finished, I was gonna say, when I hear secure entrances, because that makes sense to me, what you're saying, it makes total sense. And I don't have a lot of history of that, but that makes sense to me. And my kids have attended all the schools. So I'm second on board with that. When I hear that we're gonna get a report in October about the trending for early childhood, I'm thinking, do we have, and I may be wrong and I can be corrected, then we have enough space for the next couple of years to just knock that out then, and then worry maybe later, and that could be the next thing up is like the space, because that says right now we have space for that, and maybe we incorporate it, or there's some type of something that we can plan for the next, that right in October we get that. But if we have to start doing something now, I would say, along with, of course, the other stuff, the septic and all that other stuff, if we have a budget in place and secure, at least for like the ones that are at the most ever, it's like Reed is absolutely, that freaks me out a little bit. When I think about that, it's supposed to be a triple, I didn't know it was supposed to be. When I look at it and it clicks together, I would feel like that's the number one priority to me as far as like safety, and then obviously what needs to be done. There's just like maintenance that needs to be done. You have to do stuff when you own anything. You have to, you think about your house, you got to do stuff. Those are givens. And then there's things that it just makes sense. The kids got to be safe, especially after a year like this year. We can't have anything even close to happen after these kids haven't been in a class normally for this long. That is just the worst thing that can happen, on top of this year. So I would just second that if we're prioritizing, that's something we have to choose.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm just explaining all the
No,
big
that totally
picture
makes
and,
sense.
and the secure entrance, the point about it is that, okay, if we're doing this, we're spending the money, the best way to spend that money is not only secure entrance, but do we put on those additional classrooms because we maximize our bidding
Mhm.
capability?
Right.
We get a couple, and again, we won't know until October, but we could start the process now. You get the secure entrance, and where is the best secure entrance? And the problem is, these are the things that we as a group tell the architect, what is our thought? You know, I have my thoughts, and that's why I was saying that. I have my vision, that's my vision, and I don't want to be that sole voice that, you know, is coming back and somebody afterwards says, you know, we could have done this. And it would be like, yeah, this would have made more sense.
That
So
makes total
So
sense.
in October, we get the long range projections. How soon then is there a ABC model of here's option A, we do a secure entrance in each building, bare minimum, this is what we get. B, you know, we can dress it up a little bit. We can meet some of the needs of maybe some growth that we're going to see. C, here's the whole kit and caboodle. We're gonna be able to go after all of this. Where, because we want to be able to start to attack this, I would guess next summer, right? That's
That's the
That was-
aggressive
yeah.
timeline we could hit.
Mhm.
And
So do we
and so
have
the
that time
challenge-
for October?
Um,
From October?
we'll have information. The challenge is for Reed. We have to put Reed in a bucket because of 143rd. So for those that are new to the board, back in 2020, we did a study with Sam Schwartz. They did a school traffic circulation study of Reed, because at that point in time, the board said, we need answers. And so that was based off of what could potentially happen to 143rd, where do we need entrances and exits. So unfortunately, DOT has been very slow with information coming. No construction has begun. So it's rather difficult right now to say for sure where Reed's office should go, where that secure entrance should go. We have three options, and it's probably up to us and the architect and the principal to say this is where it needs to be, and we could do that. But the other two, Ludwig and Walsh, we could move forward on that. That's. But again, it does depend upon the money side. So I'm wondering, would now be a good time to turn over to PMA?
Definitely intend to talk about money, but I do want to clear up the safety at Reed. I do want to address a little bit in really each one of our schools. We did do some things that I have put in place, the 3-tiered secured systems before us. So I'm fairly well versed in this. We did take advantage of COVID this year and put in place measures at each one of our schools and the entrances that are a direct response to what happened at Sandy Hook. And so I won't talk about those publicly, but I would talk about those individually with any board member. And I'd be happy to go through what we've done. If we can still do better, I'm not saying we're finished with that, but we certainly over the past year have taken measures that I felt safe before. I feel safer with this in place. And we're just going to that next tier of safety. But yeah,
I'll just tag
go
on
ahead. I'm
what
sorry.
Grant said. I mean, I share his concerns, obviously, and I think we need a bias towards action, right? We can admire the problem as long as we want, but it's not going to go away. These numbers, these projections, they come in annually, so we've had time to do this, right?
Projections
for the growth, projection.
No, this is a special study that the high schools commission.
Okay.
And so they're getting their results and all the associated districts are tagging on. This is a unique thing. Projections don't come from anywhere. Projections come from superintendents doing their best. This is a study that the high school is paying for, and we are too, to have professional demographers give this. So this is a once every 10 years kind of information, and they are using the new census data, so much more reliable.
I guess my only recommendation is, to move as quickly as we can right in the October timeframe. And if if it looks like we're going to need this, continue to wait, and because we're going to need to do more construction, that, maybe there's an alternate plan that we can put even something in place, even if it's small, right? Even if it's just another barrier that's there. And it gives us, it's 2 clicks versus the 3, but it's something we can put in, at least to give us some, ability to sleep at night.
Got it. Sounds like
Financing, how do we
maybe,
pay for all this?
yeah,
What
pausing.
are some options?
The time to pause here. So I'm going to stop sharing and let me just see if Tammy is.
Tammy is
Tammy's
on. Hi,
Okay.
Tammy.
Good evening.
Hi, Tammy. I'd like to hand it over to Tammy Beckwith-Shalmo to go through a PMA presentation that's in the board book.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I assume everyone can see the screen okay, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So thanks again for the opportunity. I'm going to walk you through some initial thoughts on non-referendum borrowing options for the school district. For those of you who may have been around on the board when the district last sold bonds in 2015, those were also what are known as non-referendum bonds. So I'm going to revisit some history and explain why the district has the ability to sell non-referendum bonds. And then ultimately we'll look at a few options just to get the wheels in motion, start to think about some of these possibilities per what's already been described tonight on the project side. So first, let's talk about how and why the district has the ability to sell non-referendum bonds. Well, it really goes to the fact that you are subject to the property tax cap. And as a result of that, you as a school district in a tax cap county may issue bonds on a non-referendum basis as long as your annual debt service payments or your annual principal and interest payments do not exceed what's known as the debt service extension base, or what we call the DSEB for short. Now, your DSEB was established back in 1994, and it just goes to the amount of debt service the district had in that particular levy year for non-referendum bonds. So this law went into effect in 94. Every school district in Illinois that is in a tax cap county has a different DSEB because everyone had different amounts of debt. So again, it's to the amount of that levy for that particular year. And in a minute, I'll talk about the types of non-referendum bonds that you may issue. So when the law was enacted in 94, it said that a school district that has a DSEB could sell bonds at any given point on a non-referendum basis as long as the final maturity on a non-referendum bond issue didn't exceed 20 years. And again, that annual payment couldn't be more than the DSEB. Another law was enacted in 2009, which since that time has annually increased the district's DSEB by the CPI, and that will continue going forward unless there's a law change in Springfield. Your original DSEB was about $671,000. Through levy year 21, your annual payment limit, or your DSEB, is over $833,000. And once we learn the 2022 DSEB in January, we'll be able to increase this number again by whatever the CPI is, whatever that percentage is. As I mentioned, there are various types of non-referendum bonds a school district may issue. The two most common are working cash and life safety. And your bond issue back in 2015 was a working cash bond transaction. And school districts typically, when they sell working cash bonds, it's for capital projects. Sometimes they sell them for what we call working capital or operating capital, which means you're borrowing to bolster your fund balance or create some reserve. But in most cases, again, it's for capital projects. And what happens is a district sells working cash bonds, the bond proceeds are put into the working cash fund. And then as the district spends the money on projects, the working cash proceeds get abated or permanently transferred to the O&M fund and ultimately to the capital projects fund, because under the school code, you have to make those expenditures for projects out of the capital projects fund. Sometimes districts issue life safety bonds, and those have to be maybe issued only when there is evidence that you have various life safety approvals. So that means your architect would prepare what are known as life safety amendments and submit those to the regional superintendent and ultimately to the Illinois State Board of Education, or ISB. And ISB ultimately has to sign off on whether those projects on that amendment list are deemed life safety. So it might have some things on there that are not deemed life safety. And if that happened, you could sell the bonds as working cash. But to have that life safety distinction, you have to get the approval ultimately from ISB. The other two types that are listed here, funding bonds and tort bonds, I'm not going to spend too much time really at all on those today, because in your case, knowing you have capital projects needs and knowing, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, that you have the ability to sell working cash bonds or life safety bonds if needed to address projects, funding bonds and tort bonds really are not applicable to you at this time. Any of these types of bond issues that are listed here all require a district to hold what's called a BINA hearing, which stands for Bond Issue Notification Act. And it's very similar to the types of hearings that you have for your budget or your tax levy every year. So you have to give the public the opportunity to provide written or oral testimony at a public board meeting. Now, working cash bonds, and I've indicated funding bonds, even though we won't talk about those tonight, those also require what's known as a 30-day petition process. So what does that mean? The first legal step, if a board decides to issue working cash bonds, is they have to adopt what's called a resolution of intent to issue working cash bonds. And then shortly after that board meeting where that action occurs, a notice appears in the local newspaper. And when that notice appears, it starts a 30-day clock. And if within the 30 days, at least 10% of the registered voters within the district's boundaries sign and submit a petition to the Board of Education, the board would have a decision to make. Either it would need to consider going to direct referendum for the sale of working cash bonds, or it would have to abandon its plans altogether to sell working cash bonds. Again, your district sold working cash bonds back in 2015. It successfully went through that 30-day petition process, meaning no one submitted any petitions or signatures, but I wanted to let you know that as part of the process. Now, you may be wondering, so again, maybe a little bit more, working cash versus life safety. Life safety does not require a 30-day petition process, which is why sometimes certain districts, if they have a long list of life safety needs, they would go through that process and issue life safety. Or if under the statutory formula, under the state of Illinois, maybe they don't have enough room to issue working cash bonds. And what you're going to see in a minute is that you have ample ability to sell working cash bonds. So the first constraint we have to be mindful of is what is that maximum annual debt service payment, or that DSEB? And we'll come back to that in a minute. So we can't go out more than 20 years on whatever that maximum payment is. We also have this formula that we have to look at before you would sell bonds. And it incorporates your equalized assessed valuation, or your EAV. It incorporates corporate personal property replacement taxes. It incorporates your maximum education fund tax rate. And it also incorporates the most recent amount of evidence-based funding that the district received in the previous fiscal year. All of these are factored into a formula. It also factors in the amount of existing working cash bonds the district has, which you can see here is just under $4.2 million. And when I take everything through the formula, what you can see here is under the statutory formula, the district could issue over $21 million in working cash bonds. That's a good back pocket number to have, because it tells me and tells you we have sufficient room within the formula. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that within your DSEB restrictions, you could sell $21 million of bonds. But it's important to know this number, because sometimes school districts, when they go through the formula, they only have a couple $1 million of room and they can't sell working cash bonds, and they might think about selling life safety bonds, but that's not applicable to you because you have quite a bit of room within the formula. So first, let's look at your existing debt service payments on bonds. The red solid line is showing you what that existing DSEB is, that roughly $833,000 number I mentioned a few slides ago. The dotted red line is showing you, with continued growth in the CPI over the next 20 years, how that red solid line will change over time, because you'll continue to get that CPI growth. It's just meant to show you what that could look like. These blue bars show you what your existing debt service payments on bonds are that are on file with the county clerk. So when the district sold the bonds in 2015, documents were filed with the county clerk and directed the clerk to ultimately extend property taxes so that you as a district can make those debt service payments each year. And you can see your payments right now are about $800,000 and grow slightly each year to about $860,000 through levy year 24. And then it drops significantly in levy year 25, because that's the final year of payment due on those bonds. Here's another way to look at it. If you'd like to see the numbers, You can see here, this is where your non-referendum debt service is listed. And then again, it's only at the 2015 bond issue. And if we look at the yellow line just going across for 1 second, because that's the most recent actual year of EAV that we know for 2020, which represents payments that the district makes on bonds in fiscal year 22, your payment is here. It's about just under $808,000. And when you take that number and you divide it by the amount of EAV that you have in your district, you get a tax rate just around 10 cents. And what you can see here, if you look at these previous years and on a conservative basis, assuming your EAV would remain flat, which it won't, but if it did, your tax rate for your bond and interest levy would continue to be around a dime until we get to that last year. So as a reminder, your bond and interest tax rate is part of the total tax rate of the district. It's outside the tax cap, but it is part of that total tax rate that's included in someone's property tax bill each year. I'm gonna go back here for 1 second, because as I mentioned, your final payment on your existing bonds is in levy year 25. So the law says if you wanted to sell bonds now as a board on a non-referendum basis, you could do so because you have all this white space over here out for a 20-year period. That's reflected in what we call this remaining margin column over here. So what it means is, just looking right now at having a DSEB of about $833,000, so not incorporating growth in it each year, you can see I can, as a district, put in new debt service payments as long as my annual and total are not going to exceed based on what my DSEB is right now. So before I show you a few scenarios of what a bond issue might look like with different maturity amounts, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the municipal bond market. I think many of you know interest rates are low on the investment side of things. Well, the good news is that they're low on the borrowing side of things, which is the side that I look at every single day. And there's a few different things going on this chart. First of all, this gray shaded area is looking at what the Fed has done with short-term interest rates going back to early 2003. And the reason I include that here is because a lot of times people think that the only thing that influences the municipal bond market is the Fed. It's true on the short end of the yield curve. So if I look at this light blue line for the 1 year, and even to some degree the 5 year and a slightly darker blue, you can see that those lines follow more closely what the Fed has done with short-term interest rates. When we get out longer to the darker blue and this sort of teal green color, you can see it doesn't necessarily follow what the Fed has been doing. These lines are from what's called the Municipal Market Data Index, or the MMD, and it's kind of like the Dow Jones Industrial of the municipal bond market. So I look at this index every single day because I'm interested in what the trends are. And whether you're a school district in Will County, Illinois, or a city in Iowa, or any other type of governmental issuer of debt in this country, your bonds are going to sell at a spread to or relative to what this index is doing. And you can see natural peaks and valleys in the rates over time. And right here with this big circle, this is COVID starting in March of 2020. We saw a significant spike in rates about 15 or 16 months ago. By May of last year, we started to see a significant recovery. And now we're over here on this side of the page. We are within 10 to 15 basis points, or 0.10 to 0.15% of historically low interest rates in the municipal bond market. And the historically low spot is February of this year. Prior to that, it was August of last year. So we are in a very strong municipal bond market from the perspective of the issuer, you, the school district, thinking about selling bonds. So what's the reason that rates are still so low in the municipal bond market? The primary reason right now is because there's simply not enough supply to keep up with demand for municipal bonds. That's been the case for quite some time, for several months. And we are hopeful that that is likely going to continue for the next 6 to 9 months, but some of that could be impacted by discussions in Washington, some of the infrastructure bills that have been introduced in the House and the Senate that might spur more supply in the municipal bond market. But if some new bills were to pass, we wouldn't see an overnight influx of bonds into the market. It would be a multi-year process before that would happen. But we just don't see that there's going to be enough supply to keep up with the demand in the foreseeable future. So I'm very hopeful for, again, that 6 to 9 month horizon, hopefully even longer, we're going to see rates near historical lows, barring world catastrophe that could impact the market, kind of like COVID did. But again, the market cycles and we have ups and downs, but just the main takeaway here is we are in an historically low interest rate environment. And so for you as a board to be thinking about financing capital projects, there's really almost no better time for you to be thinking about it. So we've put together 3 scenarios today, and the common assumptions for them are: number one, the bonds would be issued in February of 2022. We know that you need some time to come up with your plan and what you want to finance. And as a result, because that is roughly 8 or 9 months away, we wanted to build some conservatism into the market in case rates do go up. So we built in 50 basis points or 0.5% just to be conservative in case rates go up. Now, before I show you these scenarios, there's one thing as a board I think it's important for you to be mindful of, particularly as you contemplate projects now over the next several months. When you sell municipal bonds for capital projects, you get to do so on what's called a tax-exempt basis. That means investors who buy your bonds do not have to pay federal income taxes on their interest earnings on your bond. So that's obviously good for that investor. And the federal government, while that's a privilege to let you do that, they don't love it so much because they don't make as much money, say, if it were a taxable bond issue. So again, your ability to sell tax-exempt bonds is a privilege. And when you sell tax-exempt bonds, there are certain spending requirements that you need to be cognizant of. So on whatever day you enter the market, I'm just going to pick a round number for the moment. Let's say it's a $5 million bond issue, and we sell those bonds on February 15th of 2022. That's the day that you close on the transaction. You have to have a reasonable expectation to achieve 2 things. Number one, you have to have a reasonable expectation to spend at least 5% or contractually obligate yourself to spend 5% of that $5 million, so $250,000 within 6 months after February of 2022. The other reasonable expectation you have to have is that you can spend 85% of all of the bond proceeds within 3 years. And that, again, that's a reasonable expectation. The government understands timelines can change. There can be weather events that can delay construction, all sorts of things, but you have to have a reasonable expectation when you sell the bonds. So that is important because as you contemplate different borrowing amounts over the next several months, and depending on what Dave and Tim bring to you in terms of project scope and how quickly you can do those projects, it's really important to keep that 6-month and that 3-year reasonable expectation in the back of your minds. Okay. All right, so we have 3 scenarios for you today. The first one is saying, what could we get? What's the maximum under 20 years if we wanted to fill up our DSEB for that period of time? What could we do? Well, first of all, I want to mention in all 3 of these scenarios also a little bit of some restructuring of your existing bonds is necessary. You may recall a few slides ago that your existing bonds are already really close to that red solid line, which means we don't have any room to put debt service payments for your new bonds unless we refinance or restructure some of your existing bonds, which you are allowed to do. And we wouldn't have to refinance a significant amount, but it is necessary. So I wanted to mention that that's the case for all 3 scenarios. So by doing that, by restructuring some of your existing bonds to make room, green or blue bars still represent existing debt service payments and post restructuring. So they before went out to 25, they would go out a few more years for your existing bonds to 28, and it would generate about $224,000 of additional interest costs versus what you would pay on those 2015 bonds now. The green bars represent new debt service payments, filling it up for 20 years and is structuring the bonds with the assumption that we'll have 1.5% CPI growth into the future. So doing that with current rates plus 50 basis points for 20 years, you could get this number here, just under $11 million of bond proceeds. And here are the numbers to support that. So if you like looking more closely at the details, this is the column, 2 columns in light blue that you would look at. It has the refunding or restructuring components. You can see the bonds would be stretched out to 28. And here we fill up 20 years and we generate, as I said, just under 11 million of proceeds. Scenario 2, what does 15 years look like? Same type of assumption, we need to restructure some debt. We don't have to restructure as much because we're not borrowing as much. You would have about $128,000 of additional debt service versus what you're currently expected to pay on those 2015 bonds. And by going out 15 years, you generate proceeds of just under $8 million. And similarly, here's the 2 columns shaded in light blue. If you want to look at the details, again, you can see we're going out 15 years versus the 20 I showed you in the prior scenario. Scenario 3, what if we just go out 10 years? And one thing I would also highlight here, the 2015 bonds that the previous board sold, that bond issue went out about 12 years, if that is helpful at all as you think about this. Because sometimes boards of education step back when they look at these types of scenarios and say, do we want to fully tap our debt service extension base or our DSEB for 20 years? Maybe we don't want to fully do that because future boards may have to finance other projects in 5 or 10 years. So this scenario is looking at, well, what if you just went out 10 years with a bond issue? Again, there's a small restructuring component, the smallest of all 3, which would generate additional interest cost of about $57,000, but going out about 10 years would generate proceeds of about $4.4 million. So it just gives you an idea, kind of the proportional difference, the different lengths of maturity, what you might be able to generate at the current market with that 50 basis points of cushion. And again, similarly, the numbers are here if you'd like to look at these later and drill down a little bit more on those details. The last slide I'd like to end with before I certainly welcome any questions is to talk about a timeline. I mentioned earlier there's some legal steps the board has to take. And from start to finish, when the board takes its first action, which is adoption of a resolution of intent and a resolution to call that public hearing or that BINA hearing I mentioned earlier, to the point where you close on the bond issue and the district actually gets its working cash bond proceeds, it's about a 3-month timeline from start to finish. So I wanted to just layer this in here so you could see if you wanted to generate those proceeds by the end of February, which I talked about a little bit earlier, backing up to that, when would you need to start the legal steps as a board? And so that answer is here. We've tentatively picked your November 16th board meeting date to start that process. And you could see we need 3 board meetings to adopt those first 2 resolutions. You'd hold your public hearing at your meeting in December. And then in January, you could take action on the actual sale. You would adopt a parameters resolution for the sale of the bonds, which would include both the working cash and that restructuring component. Once you as a board adopt that parameters resolution, which delegates the authority for the actual sale of the bonds to a couple individuals representing the district, one of them who must be a board officer, then we can go into the market, and we've slated tentatively early February. We can have the flexibility to go into the market whenever it's most beneficial to the district, because this parameters resolution is valid actually for a 6-month period. But it gives flexibility knowing that there are market changes, and we typically don't like to sell bonds on board meeting dates or be tied to a board meeting date, because lo and behold, sometimes those are not great days just because of releases by the federal government in terms of economic data that can influence the municipal bond market. So long and short of it is, it's about a 3-month process. Kind of keep these dates in the back of your mind if that's helpful to you as you think about these things over the next several months. So I will pause there. Dave or Tim, if there's anything I left out you would like to highlight, please chime in, of course, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tammy. Let me just pause for a second. Any follow-up questions?
Tammy, what investment, if we elect to go with this route, and they said that we can invest the money from those bonds until we actually would obviously begin the project and then substantial completion, what avenues do we have to invest those funds with?
Sure. That is another arm within PMA that I know Dave is pretty familiar with, I believe. But just to touch upon that briefly, It would be anything that's allowable under statute that you currently invest in your operating dollars. So it's going to be things like CDs. You could potentially invest in other municipal bonds sometimes in a portfolio. Anything that's allowed under statute for your operating dollars is going to apply to bond proceeds. But PMA has what's called a bond proceeds management program. So what happens is when you are ultimately ready to close on the transaction and you have an estimated draw schedule for the project itself and how you're going to spend those dollars from month to month over the life of your project, then the side of PMA that helps with bond proceeds management will pull together an investment schedule, come up with those that match the draw schedule for your project, and kind of try to maximize your ability to earn interest over the life of your project.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Well, not hearing any other questions. Tammy, thank you so much for presenting this evening. Definitely a lot for us to chew on.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. So this is what Dave and I were hoping to do, is really tee up the work that we've talked about tonight. We've mentioned some of it. I'm sure there's things in the facilities plan that we haven't even scratched the surface. The point would be, with the board's direction, and I think we've got a good sense of where the board wants to go, but to work hard this summer with Bill and DLA to put together some type of scenarios to start chewing on, come back to school as early as the August board meeting, and really start that process going. We've got some good work to build on. It's not like we're starting from scratch for any of this. That's what sped up the 5-year plan, and that's what we'll keep building on to move with a target of how much can we do for the summer of 22 next summer.
I don't worry about the other 3 buildings. Those would be fairly straightforward projects to get accomplished. The big mystery of Reed, right? I think that's one of the big pieces that I want to see more about, because I trust that through the committee and DLA that we'll see 1 or 2 plans for the other 3 buildings and be relatively straightforward. But the widening of the highway, I mean, we have to assume that that's going to happen and plan around that. And so I think it's time we do see our options, or what the thoughts are for alternative entrances, moving that to one side or, possibly the other side of the building, even the back. I know that's been discussed. And then how, any, the big plumbing questions that reside at Reed, because that's going to be the big ticket stuff. The rest of this, the other 3 buildings, if all we're doing is the entrances and even the office space, I mean, my guess is Walsh and Ludwig were in the $1 million, maybe $1.5 million range.
$1.5 million for a secure entrance is ballpark.
Right.
Yeah.
Oak Prairie, even less, because there's
Much
probably
less.
much less, right? I mean, that's not even real construct. I mean,
Right.
It's substantial. And then of course, Reed being our probably biggest ticket need is the way I'm seeing it, and sort of some of the things I'm expecting to see back in August or, September.
And Reed, I think you had WZ look into the different options of civil engineer.
Okay.
Yes.
Different options of how to move in different directions.
Yeah, between Sam Schwartz and then WT.
Bill's not on mic, so for the recording, maybe repeat what he's
I'm
saying.
sorry. So we've had an engineering firm, WT, do some work for us, as well as Sam Schwartz, which is a traffic consultant. And so we've done a bit of work already as directed by the board a year ago. So we've already done that preliminary work and have some idea of potential plans and what proposals might look like. So in terms of entrances, in terms of traffic flow, we've got some of those things. It's just the bigger ticket items like the water and the sewer. Those are the big things that we need to tackle and make sure we have a plan for.
But I mean, moving the entrance to either the west side of the building, to the set of doors on the west side, or somehow to the back, would, in my eyes, or in my head, move the principal's office and the nurse's office and all of those spaces. And so I guess that's where DLA becomes, and I don't think we have anything like that roughed out, do we? Or I haven't.
We don't have plans for Reed.
If you did it to the back, have the main office and the main entrance on the south end of that south wing, you're automatically at that point running the buses around and looping through.
Mm-hmm. And so then you have,
Then that, okay, now you're going, you need water and sanitary.
yeah, because we're going right over, we would be going over where they currently reside.
Yeah,
Right.
you're going right straight through the stuff. So,
Yeah, I mean, and then those numbers, like I wouldn't even begin to guess, even if we're not seeing drawings, like we need you guys to say, you're looking at 5 million just at that building.
Right.
Or whatever that number is. I have no idea.
Aren't we essentially saying this is coming no matter what?
Yeah.
I mean, if 143rd Street is gonna widen, we're gonna have to address this so again, if we don't make this commitment now, we're kicking the can down the road and we're in the situation where now we have to do it. And I don't know, my opinion is let's.
Yeah, I think we need to see the numbers. Not that we're not going to say no, but it informs our debt service conversations.
Right.
And because the idea of going out 20 years or 19 years, obviously handcuffs.
It's not good.
It's not good, right? And so what do we need to do to make Reed functional given the highway expansion? And then what we want to do the secure entrances at the other buildings, and then what other money do we have left over if we need classrooms at Walsh or other work, and again, the sewer line here and those things, I mean, those are probably pretty well-known costs, but laying out all this big ticket stuff and where we land and whether we can get it done in a 10-year issue, whether it's a 15-year issue, whether it's 12, like, it was good to hear, for me, it was good to hear that we went 12, right? Everybody, at least in my head, right? It's a 30-year mortgage, it's a 15-year mortgage, it's not 13 years. So we need to make that decision where we're comfortable. Is it 15 and less? Is it 10? All that.
So we need to prioritize the list of what has to get done, and then within that list, what are the options to get those done, right? So safety is number one, so it's dealing with, 143rd, so what are the options to solve for that?
Yeah.
Number two becomes the other safety issue of the entrances, so what are the options to solve for that, right?
Yeah.
You just got to prioritize, tackle them, and we again, bias towards action, let's make a decision and move forward.
Well,
right? We have to
the
wait
best
on-
thing about this is that even though you want to prioritize that, we can realistically, and putting DLA on the spot on this, is looking at, okay, Reed may not, we know what Reed's needs are, but it more than likely isn't going to be the 22 project because it may be
Yes.
so expansive. So we tackle Walsh, we tackle Ludwig as the first leg. And then in that same timeline, we're working, developing, refining the plans. And again, one of these situations, that's been the discussion for 5 years has been the potential growth that can happen on 143rd that we're not paying for that water and sewer service to be brought to the structure. It's running in front of us. And that's the wild card in all of this. We've also been discussing, well, we can still use well and septic. We just need to expand it. And all we need to do in that case is when we pipe for the septic, that's reinforced in a lining that should anything need to be replaced in the future, we can do that. It goes back, we take the ball fields out of commission for the better part of a season, but it could be done. And it's still going to limit what we can do at the school, but it's a viable option and it's much cheaper. So that gives us, again, we have our walking papers. And the important thing for everyone here to understand is 2 years ago, we had new administration coming in. The board did not want to take the action to make these decisions for the new administration and new board members coming in. Now that, and again, last year, Dr. Arnold can tell you that I was, on the phone with him in July saying, we need to move on projects. And COVID hit and everything changed. So the urgency has been there. It's just been the situation that priority has always been the secure entrances. And I want to stress that. It's just making sure we have the funding available to do this in an effective manner that, again, we have to address our students, but we also have to address the taxpayers that pay for this. And we want to do it in an intelligent way that we can show that we're still trying to control our expenses and do the right thing.
And I think from a planning and commitment standpoint, I think the fact that we are just relatively new board seated, April and March, I guess May or whatever, that and no plans on administrative turnover, that we are really in a good spot to tackle these big picture things. Because to your point, this happened and this happened, and it's all of this sort of starts and stops, and it finally feels like we're in a stable environment. We're ready to move hard on some of this. Bill, do you have any questions or things that?
Design of I think we could look at things independently. The main office and secured entry, at least at Walsh and Ludwig, are independent of adding on 2 classrooms, I think. Both schools, you wouldn't be adding on 2 classrooms up front here at Ludwig. You wouldn't be adding on 2 classrooms where the main office is going at Walsh. It would likely be at the end of one of the wings. So if that came through in October, November, and we need 2 additions, we can actually be designing that, at least have that plan in the back of our pocket that says, okay, well, we're going to put 2 classrooms at the end of this edition. Also, at Ludwig was the science STEM lab too, was one of the things, and was that part of the whole thing too, was addition and part of remodeling, I guess.
Yeah, I think curricular spaces need to be on the list of, so that we can prioritize. And again, having those rough budget numbers to say, this is a priority over this, and this is how we'll pay for it within our constraints. So yeah, I think certainly for me, at least, curricular spaces should absolutely be on the table.
The only other question I had early on in the presentation, we talked about life safety. Should we talk about it? Does any of the things we're talking about in terms of safety with Reed fall under that? I don't know we don't have to go dive into it, but I don't know what type of projects fall under that life safety bond.
Bill, I'm not sure if the ramp would, but
The
ramp, yeah, but I can't off the top of my head.
The life safety, when DLA did the initial work for us, most of the projects that were undertaken before the big major renovations of the buildings, life safety was the top priority, and there was a lot of state funding. So a lot of life safety concerns that were brought up by the architect firms were addressed in the past 7-8 years. That's not to say there aren't some outliers there, but as far as going the life safety route, I think the one concern there that she really didn't play up is that you have to submit your entire proposal, and then downstate decides if it's truly a life safety concern or not. So your whole project hinges on the decision of Springfield.
Yeah,
Well-
typically a secured entry addition wouldn't be considered life safety.
Right, just for example, what are maybe the last 2 or 3 life safety qualified sort of things that we've undertaken? Does anyone know?
They would have
Fire
been,
alarm.
Yeah.
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 Fire alarm.
Maybe asbestos removal if it's discovered, right?
Sprinklers, didn't we?
Sprinklers, fire alarms.
Prairie.
Yeah. So that's when they say life safety, at least that's what I always envisioned as being, I didn't know if there was,
Doors are.
what?
Doors.
Doors.
Oh.
Yeah. That we've been doing.
That's where my head went with the
Oh.
entrance, like, you know, if we're installing it not because we like people hitting buttons, we're doing it. to
Right.
safety.
Right.
That's what I
Right.
was thinking.
Right?
But life, yeah, the state defines life safety in a,
Yeah. And if there's a project risk to them saying no, and then we burn 2 months on the project.
Right.
then is it worth it? And I guess it's just understanding whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, right? If we can get the bond another way, then it's maybe not worth it. Totally.
All right.
all right. Excellent.
We've got our marching orders for this
Yes.
summer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's what we're hoping to get out of this.
Again, another conversation that we're happy to have, I think, and tackle. Okay, back to my agenda. Let's see here. No old business, any new business? Okay, information items were in the packet as our thank yous. All right, closed session. Let me get my sheet out. The board can enter into closed session to address the two topics as presented. Collective negotiating matters between the school board and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the school board has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the school board finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis of the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of closed meeting. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
I'll make it.
Second.
Who wants to be first?
Yeah, who's first?
That's a tie.
Grant, give to Grant.
Right.
Okay.
I only heard one voice. You guys are like, wait.
Was very,
Anybody else did it.
was very synchronized.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Brecky,
yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Slice.
Yes.
Middleton.
Yes.
Duffy,
Yes.
Sessions.
Yes. All right, we're in closed session.